continually make their deck a little bit more geared for the mid-range mirror, a little bit of a higher curve, a little clunkier, and I hate getting into that arms race. So whenever that arms race begins to develop, I like just going full-on aggro and just kind of, you know, catching everyone with their pants down.
And that's exactly what Korey's going to try and do here. He has a white-red humans deck. It's basically mono-white humans with some red mana and Reckless Bushwhacker as a way to just push through some damage. He even has cards like Outnumber in the sideboard, which have the potential to be very, very good. Just another 1-mana removal spell. But he is going to be fast and furious and try and put this game away before it even matters. Jeff is on a mulligan to 6. He's in the middle of his scry, so let's see what he does with that top card.
If he's on a mulligan to 6 and a draw, or on the draw, I think Jeff should just sign the slip and go get lunch or whatever.
Just I
know he just had 2 buys and probably just had breakfast, but you know, go eat lunch. You're going to need to do something to make yourself feel better after this one.
Well, he is on the play, and he does have a Shambling Vent to put on the battlefield turn 1. Korey gets to start off real early, though, with the Kytheon, Hero of Akros.
And imagine if Korey was on the play. Like, already, you know, it'd just be too good.
Well, Jeff has another tap land on turn 2 with the Hissing Quagmire. He's going to crash in for 2 with his Kytheon. He's going to add a Knight of the White Orchid to the battlefield. Not going to get any value, but it is a 2/2 first strike creature.
And Jeff really needs to have some action that impacts the board. Tyler's Tracker's decent, so it'll play some blocking, but if Korey just plays a land and attacks, Jeff's not going to be able to block at all. So, at least not against these creatures.
Little known ability on Kytheon there.
Yeah.
Gets to make it indestructible for 3 mana. And if he has one more creature that he can attack with next turn on the battlefield, or something with haste this turn, kind of like a Goblin Bushwhacker maybe, he can actually transform that Kytheon after the combat.
And a lot of times when I view a card like Tireless Tracker, the thing that it reminds me of is Courser of Krufix. It's similar in that it's like, you know, a 3-mana green creature. It isn't the most impactful play the turn you play it, but it's going to generate a lot of value over time. It's great for you know, mid-range mirrors. The one thing that's different though is this Tireless Tracker does not play particularly good blocking duty. And I'm a little surprised that Korey's willing to trade his Kytheon.
Yeah, he's just going to play an Always Watching and attack with both of his creatures.
I wonder if he just wants the Tireless Tracker off the board and wanted the block. And the other thing that's interesting is, I wonder if he had another Kytheon in hand, but it looks like he didn't.
Yeah, so Jeff is going to transgress the mine. It looks like we've got a Thalia's Lieutenant, a Knight of the White Orchid, a Plains, and a Town Gossipmonger.
Yeah.
So nothing that the Transgress, actually Transgress is just stone dead.
Yeah.
Here for the most part.
I guess you can hit a Bushwhacker. That's about it.
Yeah, I guess Bushwhacker is 3 technically.
Yeah.
Oh, and it can hit Always Watching.
I think the Reckless Bushwhackers...
It costs 3, Surges 2.
Okay.
But he's just going to play another tapped land and pass the turn. Knight of the White Orchid is going to get some value here. Korey doesn't have any red mana yet, so Jeff actually doesn't even know that he's playing against Bushwhackers yet. He thinks he's just playing against mono-white humans.
And honestly, Korey's McDuffie's deck doesn't really have enough red mana to support red spells. He has 8 red sources of mana in his deck. And you know, he's going to hit some variants every once in a while. That's what I'm getting at.
So he's going to be able to get another land here with that Knight of the White Orchid. Let's see what he decides to...
So Jeff really needs like a Languish. That's basically what he's looking for. Korey just has a lot of power and toughness on the board. Thalia's Lieutenant is going to be presenting a ton of damage. And, you know, Jeff has 4 Languish, which is good.
He does.
And he's got Dark Petition to try to find it, but he doesn't have Spell Mastery yet. And, you know, he's in a bit of a tight spot.
Yeah, he does have a copy of Deadweight in his main deck, so that he could potentially run into some spots where he's able to kill multiple creatures in one turn because of Deadweight. but always watching goes a long way towards making it so that that isn't actually a thing. And this Thalius Lieutenant's going to do a lot of damage to him.
Yeah, I haven't counted up all the damage, but Korey's can potentially play Thalius Lieutenant this turn, put a +1/+1 counter on all of his stuff, and then attack. After attackers are declared, he can tap 2 creatures to flip his Gossip Monger and then pump it. So I think that would be
3, 6,
4,
9.
8, 16 damage. So I think that Korey has the win on board here, if he does indeed have Thalius Lieutenant in hand.
That's a lot of damage real fast.
Oh, no, 12 damage, excuse me, not 16. So I don't think he has the win yet. But he can definitely push a lot of damage. Has to assume that Jeff probably got Languish off the Dark Petition, so Korey may choose to just attack with what he has here, which is still, quite a bit.
Man, if Korey were on the play this game, it would just be stone over.
Yeah.
I also really like, and we touched on it earlier, that you don't have to reveal what you get with Dark Petition.
Right.
Just like straight up old school Demonic Tutor. Whenever my opponent plays Dark Petition, I like to ask, what'd you get? Normally they say, I don't have to tell you.
I do that all the time when me and Reed are playing, and it's like a joke that I think never gets old, but he got sick of that joke like months ago. Okay, so
wow.
I guess that was lethal.
Wow, yeah, so he's just going to...
So let's see, he plays Thalius Lieutenant. The Knight of the White Orchids are 4 power each.
I think he can do 13 damage.
And then the Town Gossip Monger with the pump gets to hit for 5 damage. So yeah, I believe 13 damage. Maybe we had the life totals wrong.
Yeah.
So.
Well, either way, Jeff is going to go ahead and scoop it up to Korey McDuffie. He's going to take game 1. Let's look at the sideboards really quick and see if we can figure out what their plans are going to be. Korey McDuffie has 2 copy of Tandem Tactics, 2 Outnumber, 2 Stasis Snare, 3 Gideon Ally of Zendikar, 3 Eerie Interlude, and 3 Handwear Militia Captain. How do you think Korey's going to sideboard here?
So I think what Korey is going to do is bring in 3 Gideon and take out 3 Griff Spoons. And I don't think he's going to do anything else. I don't think that he wants more answers. I think the Always Watching are one of the better threats he can deploy against a Languish deck. And I don't think he wants Stasis Snare to answer anything. He already has the 4 Declaration in Stones. So I think Korey McDuffie is just kind of going to stick with the same game plan, try to run his opponent over. He could bring in Eerie Interlude. I don't really like the card, but if he has it in his sideboard, it probably is for matchups like this. So maybe instead of the Gideon's coming in, he brings in the Eerie Interludes. But those are the 2 cards that I would have my eye on to bring in.
When you're not token-based, just having an answer to Languish seems pretty good.
Yeah.
Now on Jeff Hoogland's side with Abzan Seasons Past, he has 2 copies of Deadweight, 2 Den Protector, 3 Duress, and Infinite Obliteration, 2 Kalidas Trader of Get, 1 Seasons Past, 2 Transgress the Mind, an Ultimate Price, and a Virulent Plague. How do you think he's going to sideboard?
So I think he's going to bring in the Den Protector, the Seasons Past, and the Transgress the Mind, because those are going to have a lot of potential to help him grind out.
Okay.
No, not really. He's not bringing in those cards. Those cards are way too slow. He's going to bring in the Deadweights.
I'm like, what?
He's going to bring, he's going to bring in the Ultimate Price and the Kalidas. And unfortunately, I think those are the only cards that are going to make his deck faster or help him stay alive longer. For the most part, Jeff has built not only his main deck but also his sideboard for mid-range mirrors.
Yeah, I do think that one card that might have potential is Den Protector, just as extra copies of Languish or waste, just extra copies of removal spells. Being a Seasons Past deck, he just has lots of one-ofs that are in his deck that just might not be worth having. So he has a lot of cards that he can shave. And Den Protector might actually just end up being better than Tireless Tracker anyway.
I don't know. From my experience of playing the green-white tokens, Tireless Tracker is able to trade with a lot of things. The Den Protector, the body actually isn't that relevant. Like the Knight of the White Orchids at first strike, Kytheon can gain Indestructible. A lot of the creatures get too big. So in my experience, at least, I found that in this matchup, the Den Protector body isn't particularly relevant. Maybe Jeff brings it in, depending on how much he has to take out, how many cards in his deck he thinks are bad. But so he might bring it in. I definitely think he'll bring in the Ultimate Price, Kalidas, and Deadweight, though.
Well, as our players are finishing up shuffling, let's take a few quick seconds to talk about something that's real neat and real new that we're doing now. We have our limited edition playmat for our pre-release, so for Eldritch Groove. And you can get Lily Llama vests here on the playmat. And before it used to be you could only get these by coming to the pre-release at Star City Games Game Center in Roanoke, or by buying it online the day after when we put the rest of the playmats that are available there. But now you can actually get them at participating stores. So if you are interested as a store owner to have these in your shop for the pre-release, or if you want to have your LGS get them, you can tell them to go.starcitygames.com/pre-release to get a hold of us to see if you can get that playmat. Wednesday, June 8th is the cutoff for that playmat. So here for Game 2, Korey McDuffie is going to be up a game on White Red Humans against Jeff Hoogland on Abzan Seasons Past. Korey doesn't have a turn 1 play, but Jeff was able to play a Shambling Vent into a Llanowar Waste. Take a point of damage, but that Sylvan Advocate is going to provide some much needed defense.
Yeah, Sylvan Advocate is just the best thing Jeff could do on turn 2 for sure. Wow.
Korey's just going to spend his turn 2 using Declaration, taking care of that Advocate.
Yeah, so that is really surprising to me. Generally speaking, when you're playing a aggro deck, you want to play your threats first and your removal spells after. And because Korey doesn't have any threats in play, Jeff has essentially extra time to crack that clue. So I wonder if Korey has a weak hand. That's like what I would read into this situation if I were Jeff. But the fact that we're at Korey's turn 3 and there's no creatures on the board has to make Jeff just feel great.
Yeah, this is going to give Jeff a chance to utilize that clue to draw some cards. Korey does have a Knight of the White Orchid here to accelerate him, which is another reason that he might have just taken that turn off with the clue so that he could actually play the Knight and get some value off of it. But not having creatures isn't as big of a detriment for this particular list of the Humans deck, because Bushwhacker can catch you up in a couple turns if you need it to.
Yeah, this White-Red Humans deck, though, it really wants to just start out ahead, though. Jeff is in the business of catching up with Languishes. Korey's in the business of being ahead with Kytheons. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out. If Korey's able to win this, him being on the draw and not deploying a threat until, turn 3 is like kind of problematic. This is a nice play, though, on his part.
So he's going to be able to Knight of the White Orchid, Surge a Bushwhacker, crash in for 6. Ooh, but we have a Grasp in Darkness is going to get rid of that Knight of the White Orchid. Jeff is going to take a point of damage for casting the Grasp, though.
So setting up this specific sequence makes the turn 2 Declaration in Stone, it makes it make a little more sense. I still feel like it doesn't bode well for Korey, though.
This Kalitas is going to come down for Jeff and be a pretty big roadblock.
Yeah, and this is one of the things that is tricky when you're playing a deck like the White-Red Humans is you want to have your deck be like 95% threats because you just want to run your opponent over and you don't want your draw getting clogged with removal spells. That said, Jeff has a couple potent threats that Korey needs to worry about, Kalitas being one of them. And when Jeff has them early and Korey doesn't have an answer, it can be a pretty bad situation for Korey. But that's just kind of the way you roll the dice with this deck. That's sort of what you sign up for.
Well, Korey does have a copy of Gideon, Ally of Zendikar. He's going to make a 2/2 Knight Ally token. He's going to play another land and also play Kytheon. So we have a Gideon tribal deck.
Yep. not exactly the most synergistic kind of tribal deck.
Well, he's not Gideon on the backside.
Yeah.
But the transformation, it's not an if. Mm-hmm. It's not a may.
Yeah.
So if that Gideon attacks with 2 other creatures at the end of combat, it will transform and you will have to pick one of them to keep.
Yeah. I have to imagine that means that Korey's likely to just make an emblem pre-combat. So
more than likely.
Unfortunately, though, he may not have any attacks. The other thing that I like to focus on when I'm playing really aggressive decks that have a low removal count is whenever my opponent plays some sort of roadblock, I always try to ask myself, do I have to answer this, or can I just deploy a bunch of stuff and kind of like slam into it? And so, you know, I sort of wish I knew exactly what was in Korey's hand on turn 2, because I find that turn 2 Declaration of Stone a pretty interesting play, and it has, you know, led to implications on many of the following turns being a situation where he doesn't have as much momentum as he wants, and this Kalidas being a serious roadblock.
Well, Jeff is just going to cash in that clue on his turn after playing an Evolving Wilds and passing it back. Korey's going to plus his Gideon.
Well, it's the only good attacker.
Let's see what else he's going to do. He's just going to crash in with Gideon.
And into open mana, I mean, Jeff's life total is high enough where he could just take the 5 damage, but you also, Korey also has to worry about a Grasp in Darkness, just killing something, making a blocker.
Well, Jeff is just going to take the 5, go down to 11.
And I like that play. Jeff, you know, has some life to work with. Even if he does have a Grasp in Darkness, it's probably better to keep the token around rather than chump block it, but he may also just have nothing.
Korey's going to pass the turn back after just playing a land.
And so now Korey can probably safely assume that Jeff doesn't have a Grasp in Darkness. Jeff would have almost certainly fired one off if he had one, or Ultimate Price for that matter.
So Jeff's just going to draw for the turn. Ooh, it looks like he has a copy of Dragonlord Dramoka in his hand.
Yeah, that's a pretty nice one.
I wonder if he's just going to slam it. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. I mean, if you couldn't deal with the Kalidas, what's he going to do about, you know, the Dragonlord?
Big Mama Dragonlord Dramoka.
Yeah.
5/7, can't be countered, flying lifelink. Your opponent can't cast spells during your turn.
Mm-hmm.
How is Korey going to take care of this? We need a Declaration in Stone off the top. But even then, there's still a Kalidas you got to worry about.
Yeah. And if Korey had been psychic and could have seen how this game was going to play out, he almost would have certainly just not used a Declaration on Stone on the Sylvan Advocate, knowing he could use Gideon as an emblem or the Bushwhacker trigger to push through it and potentially trade with it. And he would have wanted that Declaration Stone to hit one of these other, you know, big heavy hitters. But right now, all Korey can do is threaten a big counterattack. But Jeff's probably not going to be too worried about that as soon as he starts gaining some life.
Yeah, Korey's just going to make a 2/2 Night Ally, play a Needle Spires. Here, Jeff is going to try and dispatch that Gideon.
And one thing that's pretty common with these really aggressive decks is when they're doing their thing, they look unbeatable. And when they're not doing their thing, they kind of look embarrassing. So one of the things that you got to do when you're watching a deck like this is you can't just look at the you can't just look at the draw for face value. You kind of got to look at the whole picture and sort of say, yeah, when this deck is on the play with a decent draw, it's just almost always unbeatable. This game, not so much. It kind of looked embarrassing, but
well, Jeff just went ahead and dispatched that Gideon. For those of you who missed it, Languish swept up the board. It got rid of the Kalidas, but it brought 2 zombie tokens along with it. And then Jeff followed that up with the Tireless Tracker. So he is going to take that game and even up the match 1-1. Do you think that either of these players are going to change up their sideboarding at all?
I don't think the player draw is going to change things either way, no.
Yeah, I don't think so either. All of these cards just seem like, you know, these are just the cards that are good for this matchup. This is why they're here in my sideboard. Yeah,
the only time I feel like people do something differently on the player of the draw is if you have a card like Daze that is like only specifically good on one side, although I basically keep my Dazes in all the time, but some people like to board them out when they're on the draw. Or it's a situation where your decks are similar speeds and there's a role reversal. Like it's like whoever's on the play is going to be the beatdown player. But in this, Jeff is always going to be the control. Korey's always going to be the beatdown, so they just sideboard according to that.
All right, so while our players are finishing up sideboarding here for Game 3, let's take a quick look at the StarCityGames.com weekly sale. So this is going to end Monday at 10:59 a.m. And right now, you can get up to 50% off select rare foils and foil mythics. So if you have a commander deck, if you have a cube, or even if you just want some sweet foils for your standard, modern, or legacy deck.
Maybe you want to have a standard deck and intimidate people. You know, that's a good way to do it.
See, I'm the type of person, I enjoy playing with foils, but only if I can have the whole deck foil.
And when I sit down against someone and they have a full foil deck, I'm like, wow, this guy probably knows his deck inside and out. And I get worried.
So, again, make sure you go to StarCityGames.com to check out our weekly sale. This does end Monday at 10:59 a.m. You get up to 50% off select foil rares and foil mythics. Now, there are some decks that I think that rule is like even more applicable. The one in particular is in any format. If I sit down and my opponent is playing a Merfolk deck that's foil, I know that guy has been playing Merfolk, or that guy or girl has been playing Merfolk since the beginning of time, and they probably know it better than I know. You know, the back of my hand.
Since Master of the Pearl Trident was in Standard back in like the 90s or whatever.
Yeah, that's like one of the few decks that, like, whenever I see somebody that has that deck in foil, it's just like, man, you didn't just recently make the decision to get this. This wasn't something you took lightly. I think that Dredge is another deck that the players that have foil Dredge decks, that just like
also
playing
Storm.
Dredge forever. Yeah. Man, I don't think that there are any decks in the current Standard that fall into that category, but last Standard, anybody that had a foil Abzan deck has just been playing Abzan since Siege Rhino was printed, nonstop. They just followed the BBD, just play all the Abzan decks, Siege Rhino.
Yeah, and I can respect that. That's something that I do. Not foil my deck out, but be in a situation where I find one deck that I like relatively early in the season. I sort of spend some time really thinking about, is this the deck? And then I'll decide that it is, and then I'll just ride it out for the whole season and crush everyone.
Now, another player that tends to pick up a deck and play it for a long time is Jeff Hoogland. So let's take a quick look at his player profile. He's 25 from Bloomington, Illinois. He has 13 open top 8s, 0 wins as of yet, 1 invitational top 8 with no wins. He's a stay-at-home dad with 2 awesome sons who are future Magic players. He manages several open-source coding projects focusing on Linux, and he has a master's degree in mathematics. I mean, you got to be pretty smart to get a master's in mathematics.
Yeah, you know, that's I went to art school, but I always think that it would have been nice if I'd taken like a statistics class or, you know, like one of these slightly more advanced math classes, because you know, like there's so many times I'm like, am I going to top deck this card or not? And like, I mean, I can do like a little bit of napkin math, but I know it's not right. Like you've got like hypergeometric calculators online that you can reference, and I know like how to use them, but you know, it'd be nicer to have like that extra level of understanding.
Well, if you play long enough, you start to get
you do get like
an intuition about it. It's not like, there'd be a lot of times, especially when I'm playing decks that I'm just like really in tune with, like Green Red Dragons, Jund Monsters, where it's like, all right, I know this is what's going to happen and this is what needs to happen, and like this is the odds that it's going to happen, but I can't give you those numbers or explain to you why it's going to happen that way.
Yep.
Well, Corey's going to start off quickly here with a Gossip Monger. Jeff's just going to play a Quagmire and pass. Korey has a Thraben Inspector. Looks like he's going to flip this Gossip Monger and then pass the turn back.
Would have been nice to have a slightly more powerful 2-drop, but I still like Corey's position. This is what he wants to do, is just get onto the board early and often and really put Jeff to the test, forcing him to have a Languish to clean up the board.
Well, Jeff's just going to play a Quetzalcoatlus and pass. It looked like he had a Sylvan Advocate in his hand, but he's going to opt to just use a removal spell here, so let's see how this turn plays out. Corey's going to play a Battlefield Forge. Ooh, and he has an Always Watching. It's going to pump his creatures.
Yeah, I like this.
Thraben Inspector. Old Rabble's going to get into the combat.
Ooh, that's one of the weird ultimate prices. I think that's like a promo.
Yeah, so Jeff's going to use an ultimate price to take care of that Gossip Monger. It's going to take 2 damage from the Thraben Inspector, fall down to 18. But now he's going to get the turn back relatively safe. If he can take care of that Thraben Inspector and then start to stabilize with something like Kalitas, I think he'd be in a good spot.
Yeah.
Sylvan Advocate's going to come down in addition to a Hissing Quagmire. Pass the turn back to Korey. This is going to be a big turn for Korey. If he can, you know, either somehow get rid of that Sylvan Advocate or set up a board presence where it's profitable to attack through it, he could put Jeff in a real awkward spot here.
Yeah, Korey has a very limited number of removal spells, so I would prefer that he found a way to ignore the Sylvan Advocate and just try to swarm around it and push through it. I wouldn't want to use the removal spell on it unless I thought that I couldn't do that, or it got to a 4/5 and I could actually start eating blockers. So I feel like Korey has a Thalia's Lieutenant. Oh, okay, Gideon. So I like this.
Yeah, he attacked with the Thraben Inspector just to get a chump check in there to see if Jeff's going to block. Then he's going to play a Gideon and deploy a now 3/3 Knight Ally token. This puts him in a real good spot. He has a lot of threats on the battlefield. Some of them are very difficult for Jeff to actually handle, and he's going to be hard-pressed to take advantage of this game state.
Yeah, and a sweeper on this board state isn't particularly profitable for Jeff. I believe Korey has a Thalia's Lieutenant in his hand, which is potentially a ton of damage. And, you know, I assume that Korey doesn't really matter or care if his Gideon takes 2 damage. I would assume that there's going to be no block here.
Now, correction, I did misspeak. The Always Watching does not affect tokens, so that Knight Ally is still only a 2/2.
Yeah.
Grasp is going to take care of the Thraben Inspector. Advocate's going to attack for 2 and bring Gideon down to 2 counters.
And so Korey can plus Gideon, making him safe from another Sylvan Advocate hit, and then play the Thalia's Lieutenant and make the Gideon a 6/6 and attack for, you know, potentially 9 damage, which would be quite good. But Korey may also want to just make a token and then play the Thalia's Lieutenant to make both of his token 3/3s and put Jeff in a situation where he kind of needs a sweeper.
Korey's going to make a token. Maybe we have a Griff Spoon coming here to the skies.
Ooh, I do like a Griff Spoon. This looks like a 1-drop with the way that he was placing it. Griff Spoon would be really good. Griff Spoon is so good too because it, you know, it just keeps coming back.
Yeah, it's like Rancor.
Yeah. I do think that it's one of the cards that Korey is likely to board out, but leaving a small number might not be a bad idea.
Well, Knight of the White Orchid is going to come down for Korey. He's not going to get any value on it because he was on the play there, but it is going to be a 3/3 first striking creature, which is pretty big.
Yeah. I thought I saw a Thalia's Lieutenant in Korey's hand, but I must have been wrong.
He's just going to pass the turn back to Jeff. Jeff does have 4 mana here, potentially 5 if he plays his land for the turn. He's facing down a pretty formidable board, though.
He is. That Sylvan Advocate, though, is pulling a lot of weight. It's blanking multiple tokens, and Jeff's, like, I mean, Jeff would be almost dead if that Sylvan Advocate wasn't around.
He has another Hissing Quagmire for his turn. He does have a lot of these lands that enter the battlefield tapped.
Yeah.
8 copies of creature lands.
Wow, he has 8?
Yep, 4 and 4.
Dude, we need to talk about that. That is a lot of coming to play tapped lands. If Jeff gets through this, he's got to feel like he's dodging a bullet.
So Jeff's going to go ahead and play a copy of Deadweight here. We're seeing where it's going. All right, it's going to shrink the Knight of the White Orchid down to a 1/1. He is 1 land away here from turning on his Sylvan Advocate. Not only will it be a 4/5, but it also pumps up all those creature lands. And like we said, he has a bunch.
Yeah.
Korey's going to sacrifice his Clue on Jeff's end step and then take his turn. Man,
so Korey,
these clues are awesome.
Yeah, clues are good. Korey really needs to, like, get something going, though, in this kind of board stall where Jeff is able to just hit his land drops and slowly pick things off. It's not really to Korey's advantage. His deck's edge lies in the early game. Jeff's deck has an edge in the late game, and Korey really needs to make use of it before Jeff, you know, starts hitting his 7th, 8th land drop and casting big spells.
We're getting to the point now where Dark Petition is going to be turned on next turn to be able to cast some 4-mana spells.
Yeah.
All right, Gideon is going to +1. Jeff's going to stop Korey in his combat step before he declares attackers. Maybe he has something like Anguish Sunmaking to take care of that Gideon.
It might have actually been, does the Always Watching affect the Gideon?
It does.
Yeah, so I think Jeff was just saying that doesn't tap.
Fair enough. He's going to chump with his Sylvan Advocate.
So an end of turn Anguish Unmaking on the Gideon, untap Languish would be a great line of play for Jeff. And his life total is pretty high. So I feel like that is something that is in the cards. That said, it might not have been bad for him just to take the damage so he gets to keep his Sylvan Advocate through a Languish.
Yeah, I definitely agree.
Okay, so this is his only good way to cash in this Pulse of Marasa, and it looks to be that that's all he could do that turn.
Yeah, so he's going to cash in this Pulse on his Sylvan Advocate. Going to gain 6 up to 24, get it back in his hand. Korey's just kind of pumping the brakes here. He has plenty large board presence, doesn't want to overextend into a Languish. That Gideon's going to be tough for Jeff to handle on its own anyway.
Yeah, the fact that this board can't be answered by Languish because the Gideon would be left over is a pretty big deal for Korey's strategy.
Jeff's going to go ahead and replay that Sylvan Advocate. Going to play a 6 land, which is going to turn it on and pass the turn back. Korey's going to sacrifice his Max McDuffie Clue token and draw a card.
And Jeff's plays on this turn and last turn, they've been good enough, but not particularly great. He really needs to start answering things. Korey's just developing a bigger and bigger board, and you know, as soon as he finds some Thow's Lieutenants, he's going to start getting aggressive.
Yeah. Jeff does have a couple copies of Anguished Unmaking and a couple copies of Sorin in his deck as ways to actually answer that Gideon. Outside of that, though, he doesn't have a whole lot. Oh, he does have 3 Ruinous Path. I'm sorry, I missed this when I first went through the deck. He also has 3 Ruinous Paths, so that's good. Oh. Korey is going to plus that Gideon and attack for 6. Jeff's just going to take it this time.
Yeah, and Jeff has a lot of life to work with, so I'm not surprised that he's just taking the damage.
Korey is just going to play a land and pass back.
And Jeff really hasn't done much this game. Wow, and he brought in the Den Protector, like you said.
Here comes the Morph.
It's actually pretty amazing that we're at this point and Jeff has done so little.
Yeah.
I mean, he's cast like 2 removal spells, a Sylvan Advocate and a Pulse of Marasa, and you know, that was like, you know, his turn 6. Like basically 3 2-mana spells and 1 3-mana spell. That I would not expect him to be in such good shape if someone had told me that and I hadn't seen the rest of the match.
Now this Den Protector is actually pretty interesting, as it's going to be 3 power and can start pressuring that Gideon. And right now, Korey doesn't have anything that can block it.
Yeah. Also, he can flip the Den Protector up and have 2 mana open to cast either the Grasp in Darkness or Ultimate Price. So this is a turn where Jeff is essentially casting 2 things in a turn, a removal spell and a creature.
Korey does have a lot of options, though. Looks like he has 5 cards in his hand, and only one of which is a basic land. Oh, a land, period. He does have to be very wary of sweepers, though, so he's trying to not overextend into them.
Yeah, it seems like Korey's been playing extremely afraid of the sweeper, and you know, it's kind of interesting because previously when we were watching the Grixis matchups, I was talking about how, you know, you can go either way with things, but typically with the removal spells, I like to be a little bit more frugal with their use. In a situation like this, a lot of times when I'm playing the aggro deck, I'll just slam into my opponent as hard as I can and just say, if you have a sweeper, I lose. If you don't have a sweeper, I'm going to wreck you. And just, you know, a lot of times they just don't have time to find their sweeper. So usually that will be a good strategy. But Korey has really chosen to be conservative with his aggro deck and pace his threats rather slowly.
All right, so here's a Thalia's Lieutenant.
Yep.
He's going to pump a bunch of different creatures.
Oh, and those are knights. They're not knight humans.
Correct.
Okay.
They're knight allies.
So I'm sure Twitter is ablaze with you know, my Thalia's Lieutenant play that I was pushing earlier.
Okay. Well, the Thalia's Lieutenant is going to pump a lot of creatures.
Yep. So what's nice about this is Korey's getting a bunch of his creatures big enough so that they won't die to a Languish. Like his Thraben Inspector and his other is the Thalia's Lieutenant he played first are both 5 toughness, which, you know, now he has plenty of blockers for the Den Protector. He's got you know, some okay attackers. Looks like he's still only going to attack with the Gideon, but Korey's played this in a way where he's kind of safe against Languish at the expense of giving Jeff a lot of time to set up. So we'll see how well this strategy plays out for Korey.
You know, Jeff does have access to that ultimate price in his graveyard this turn, so he can take care of, you know, one of those lieutenants. And then if he has another removal spell into a Languish, then he could still clean this board up.
Yeah.
Looks like he's just going to chump with the Den Protector. He's going to get back the Pulse of Marasa.
So I think
this seems like a real long game plan.
Yeah, this is definitely the clunkier way to do things. Jeff may just be saying, if I don't draw a Languish to kill multiple things, I'm going to die no matter what. So I'm just going to try to gain some life and some chump blocks to buy as much time to see a Languish. I think that's the line of thinking, at least.
He's going to pull some Marasa back that Den Protector. Just going to remorph it.
Yeah, and this does force Korey to commit more attackers. That said, Korey has a lot of good attackers this turn.
Yeah, Jeff's down to one card in hand, so he just doesn't have a Languish yet.
Yeah. Yeah, Jeff's draw was, I guess all in all, it was pretty lackluster, and I was saying how I felt like he didn't make particularly impactful plays considering he has such a powerful deck. And I guess a lot of it comes down to the fact that his draw just, you know, wasn't really that great. He just had a lot of 2 and 3 mana stuff, which isn't, you know, what you want in a big, expensive deck. You want some of those big heavy hitters.
Yeah. All right, so another Dragon Hunter is going to come down for Korey McDuffie. That's going to pump both of his lieutenants. One's a 4/4, one's a 6/6.
One nice thing about Korey's deck with the red splash is the Needle Spire gets pumped by the Always Watching. And so if he does attack with it, it's quite big. Wow, that's big.
Yeah, so this Bushwhacker is
Dude, is there any way he's just dead?
Pump a lot. I think he...
So there's the really big Thalia's Lieutenant and the Gideon. So let's just say both of those get blocked. And that's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14... 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. Yeah, I think that's lethal. Wow.
Either way, he'll be dead the next turn.
No, I think he was dead that turn. So that was a ton of damage. So Korey played that in a pretty interesting way. He just built up and built up and built up, did his best to play around Languish, and with the Goblin Bushwhacker, the Thalia's Lieutenant, I'm pretty sure he had that Thalia's Lieutenant early on, and he was just saving it until he could play it in a way that kept him safe against Languish.